डॉक्टर बाबासाहेब आंबेडकर ओपन यूनिवर्सिटी.
Hello friends, welcome back again for the course on cybersecurity tools, techniques and countermeasures. So today we are again starting our previous session, attack vectors, threat, risk and vulnerability. Friends, in our earlier session we discussed various attacks, the risk associated with, key terminologies, and we have divided the things into active attacks and passive attacks, and we discussed all those attacks which they are directly or indirectly associated with active or passive attacks. Friends, let's begin again with the remaining topics. So here in this session we will be discussing the attacks, those are remained for the discussion in our earlier session. We will further discuss the risk assessment methodology, how exactly the risk can be assessed, the risk can be managed, and what are the relevant process associated with it. We will discuss the summary about this particular topic, about this particular session. Now friends, let's talk about malware attacks. So malware attacks can be described as malicious software that is installed in your system without your consent. Here in a simple terminology we discuss it as a virus. So it can attach itself to the legitimate process or replicate itself or can put itself to startup. The objective of the malware could be to exploration, information, disrupt business operations and demand payments. So there are many types of malwares. Below are some of the commonly known types. So let's discuss different types of malware attacks. So the first one is macro virus. So this virus is infect applications such as Microsoft Word or Excel. Macrovirus attached to an application's initialization sequence. When the application is opened, the virus executes instructions before transferring the control to the application. The virus replicates itself and attaches to other code in a computer system. Let's talk about another malware attack. It is called as Trojans. A Trojan or a Trojan horse is a program that hides in a useful program and usually has a malicious function. A major difference between viruses and Trojan is that Trojan do not self-replicate. In addition to launching the attacks on a system, a Trojan can establish a backdoor that can be exploited by the attackers. Now let's talk about logic bomb. A logic bomb is a type of malicious software that is appended to an application and is triggered by specific occurrences such as logical condition or a specific date and time. So this is all about the malware attacks, Trojans and logic bombs. Now let's talk about worms. Worms differ from virus in that they do not attach to a host file but are self-contained program that propagate across networks and computers. A typical worm exploits involves the worm sending a copy of itself to every contact in an infected computer's email address. In addition to conducting malicious activities, a worm can result in denial of service attack against nodes on the network. Now let's talk about another malware attack, that is dropper. A dropper is a program used to install viruses on computers. In many instances, the dropper is not infected with malicious code and therefore might not be detected by virus scanning software. A dropper can also connect to the internet and download updates to virus software that is resident on a compromised system. Now let's talk about another malware attack, and that is mostly used in a nowadays day-to-day activity and day-to-day life. That is called ransomware attack. A ransomware is a type of malware that blocks the access to the victim's data and threatens to publish or delete it unless a ransom is paid. While some simple computer ransomware can lock the system in a way that is not difficult for a knowledgeable person to reverse, more advanced malware uses a technique called cryptoviral extortion and asks for the payment in Bitcoin, so which encrypts the victim's file in a way that makes them nearly impossible to recover without the decryption key or using the decryptor if it is available. So before few years this kind of attack was carried out and the ransomware demanded for different government organizations. Now let's talk about adwares. So adwares are some type of application, or we can say adware is a software application used by companies for marketing purpose. Advertising banners are displayed while any program is running. Adware can be automatically downloaded to your system while browsing any website and can be viewed through pop-up window or through a bar that appears on a computer screen automatically. Now let's talk about spyware. Spyware is a type of program that is installed to collect information about users, their computers or their browsing history. It tracks everything you do without your knowledge and sends the data to a remote user. It also can download and install other malicious programs from the internet. Spyware works like adware but is usually a separate program that is installed unknowingly when you install another freeware application. So it is working like a spy. Now let's talk about the another attack, that is zero-day exploit. A zero-day exploit is after a vulnerability has been announced but before a patch or solution is implemented. Attackers target disclose vulnerability during this window of time. So that is some sort of targeted time and targeted application. Now what exactly the countermeasures for these particular attacks? So to prevent such attack, we need to ensure that the antivirus product is up to date with the latest signatures, continuous user education, performing regular audits, regular backup of the websites, applications and databases at multiple locations. So these are some of the most important things if you want to protect your data, information or application from unauthorized users attacks. Now we will start with understanding the complex risk rating methodology. It will also include different steps such as risk analysis, risk assessment and risk management. So these are three important procedures or three important steps we need to follow for any particular organization for protecting our data, application and our assets or physical or virtual assets. Now let's talk about risk assessment. So what exactly the risk assessment is? Identifying threats and vulnerabilities is very important to build a robust security architecture. If we do not know anything about threat or vulnerability, we cannot protect our data, we cannot protect our assets. So it always starts with identifying what are the important assets which we need to be secured from the threats. So the first and foremost task is to define the scope of cybersecurity risk assessment. being able to estimate associated risk to the business is very important. So, here we can define the formula for the risk. The risk is equals to assets multiplied by threats multiplied by vulnerabilities divided by countermeasures or controls we took into. So, what exactly assets? So, assets, what are we trying to protect? Threats, what are we trying to protect against? Vulnerability, what are we trying to address? And the controls, what we are doing to address them. So, this is all about the risk assessment. Now, let us talk about the assets. Assets can be categorized in various types such as hardware, software, data and communication channel. So, here the communication channel can be physical or virtual. So, in details it can be described as follows. Physical assets such as computer, laptop, networking devices, storage devices, etc. Software such as operating system, application running on the system, services running, port scanning, API services, protocols used and policies. So, all these are part of scope of the risk assessment. One may identify security concern in architecture or design. So, by using this process, it is possible to estimate the severity of all this risk to the business and make an informed decision about what to do about those risks. Having a system in place for rating risk will save time when there is a situation arise to take the critical business decision to reduce the impacts. Friends, now let us talk about asset value assessment. For different people and for different organization, the value of the asset might be different. So, how exactly we can make the value assessment for any particular asset? So, we will be discussing over here. This would be the first involved in measuring the asset or asset value, which is part of the critical business process. An asset can be the people, the process, the hardware, the software, data, any tangible or intangible, can include the reputation of the organization, loss of customer and services. So, these are the things which are part of the critical business process. In order to achieve greater control in risk and with effective least cost, identifying and prioritizing the assets are a critical part of the process from top priority to least priority. So, we need to prioritize our assets, and based on that we can evaluate and we can make the value assessment over here. This can be achieved by identifying the core functions and the process of the organization. Along with this, identifying the physical infrastructure, assets which can be critical hardware or software relate to the business functions and safety measures which are pre-installed for the emergency situation need to be also considered. Now, threat sections and its countermeasures. So, friends, as per the RFC 2828, we will see some terminology related to the threat. We have already seen the definition of threat in the first section of the key terminologies. So, after identifying the asset value assessment and qualifying it, the next step is to conduct the threat assessment where the potential threats are identified. So, there is another relative term, hazard, is also used for the threats which are natural or not man-made, such as earthquake, flood or wind disaster, which also needs to be considered, and the man-made hazard can be either technological threats or terrorism, which can refer as threats for simplicity. So, here let us talk about three important terminology: threat action, threat analysis and threat consequences. So, threat action it is an assault on the system security. Threat analysis, it is an analysis of the probability of occurrences and consequences of damaging the actions to a system. Threat consequences, it is a security violence that results from a threat action, includes disclosure, deception, disruption and erasure. So, it includes disclosure, deception and disruptions. So, what exactly threat analysis is? Our next goal here is to estimate the likelihood of a successful attack by this group of threat agents. For this, we will use OWASP risk rating methodology for preparing the severity of the risk assessment model. Let us discuss the skill level, motive, opportunity and other relevant terminology for the threat analysis. So, here in the skill level, we can relate or we can rate how technically the skill is group of threat agents. So, if they know technical skill, so we can rate them 1, some technical skills, so we can rate them 3, advanced computer user, we can rate them 5, network and programming skill, we can rate them 6 and security penetration skills, we can rate them 9. Now, let us talk about the motive. How motivated is this group of the threat agents to find and exploit this vulnerability? So, low or no reward, we can rate them 1, possible reward, we can rate them 4 and highest reward or high reward, we can rate them 9. Now, the opportunity. What resources and opportunities are required for this group of threat agents to find and exploit this vulnerability? So, full access or expensive resources required 0, special access or resources required 4, some access or resources required 7 or no access or resources required 9. Now, the size. How large is this group of threat agents? The developers 2, system admins 2, intranet users we can rate them 4, partners we can rate them 5, authenticated user we can rate them 6, anonymous internet users we can rate them 9. So, thus use of a rating system will help in qualification of the risk and there is always a difficulty in justifying the protection of assets. So, management is better able to understand the implications of the threat and vulnerabilities when they are presented in the form of numbers and statistics, which means quantifiable and measurable. Now, friends, let us discuss about vulnerability analysis. Vulnerability is a weakness that a threat can exploit to breach security and harm your organization. Vulnerabilities can be identified through vulnerability analysis, audit reports, the NIST vulnerability database and the vendor data. The problem faced within many organizations is the ability to effectively filter out the false positive from assessment applications. The result of various manual and automated tools must be verified in order to accurately determine the reliability of the tools in use and to avoid protecting an area that in reality does not exist. So, false positive results can be mitigated by ensuring that the assessment applications are up to date with the latest table, signature and patches. So, there are two ways to penetrate for penetration testing and vulnerability analysis can be done. One with having the knowledge of system and topology, another with zero knowledge, which is mostly conducted externally, known as black box testing. So, let us talk about the risk assessment and its examples. So, examples of vulnerabilities are lack of. So, friends, let us talk about some of the examples of vulnerabilities. Lack of sufficient logging mechanism, input validation vulnerability, sensitive data protection vulnerability, session management vulnerability, cryptographic vulnerability, memory leak issue, cross-site request forgery, remote code execution, business logic vulnerability. So here we have provided VAPT process for this particular system. So what exactly we need to do is, we need to prepare checklist for the target, we need to do some sort of assessment performed using automated as well as manual tools, we need to do verification of vulnerabilities of various penetration tests to avoid FPs, and we further need to do analysis of outcomes and reporting the findings with recommendations. So this is all about the VAPT process. Now let us talk about the vulnerability factors. The goal here is to estimate the likelihood of particular vulnerability involved being discovered and exploited. Assumes the threat agent selected above. So what exactly we need to do is ease of discovery. How easy is it for this group of threat agents to discover this vulnerability? The practically impossible, that can be given 1, difficult, that can be given 3, easy, that can be given 7, and automated tools available, that can be given 9. So ease of exploit. So how easy it is for this group of threat agents to actually exploit this vulnerability? Theoretical 1, difficult 3, easy 5, automated tools available, so again 9. Awareness, how well known is this vulnerability to this group of threat agents? Unknown 1, hidden 4, obvious we can rate them 6, and public knowledge we can rate them 9. Now let us talk about intrusion detection. So how likely is an exploit to be detected? So active detection in application, that we can give 1, logged and reviewed we can give 3, logged with review we can give 8, and not logged we can give 9. Now what exactly estimating impact related to this risk assessment? So when estimating the impact of successful attack, it is important to consider the technical impact and business impact. Ultimately the business impact would be more important. So by providing the appropriate technical risk details which will enable management to make the decision about the business risk. Technical impact factors, the goal is to estimate the magnitude of the impact on the system if the vulnerability were to be exploited. Finally, the loss of confidentiality. So how much data could be disclosed and how sensitive it is? So minimal non-sensitive data disclosed, that can be given 2, minimal critical data disclosed, that can be given 6, extensive non-sensitive data disclosed, that can be given 6, extensive critical data disclosed, that can be given 7, and all data disclosed, that can be given 9. So this is something related to estimating the impact of this attack on a system or on a data. Then loss of integrity, how much data could be corrupted and how damaged is it? So minimal slightly corrupt data, that can be given 1, minimal seriously corrupt data, that can be given 3, extensive slightly corrupt data, that can be given 5, extensive seriously corrupt data, that can be given 7, and all data totally corrupt, that can be given 9. Now the loss of availability, how much the service could be lost and how vital is it? So minimal secondary service interrupted, that can be given 1, minimal primary service interrupted, that can be given 5, extensive secondary service interrupted, that can be given 5, extensive primary service interrupted, that can be given 7, and all services completely lost, that we can give 9. Loss of accountability. So are the threats agents actions traceable to an individual? Fully traceable we can give 1, possibly traceable we can give 7, completely anonymous, that we can give 9. Now, let us discuss about the business impact factor to this particular attack. So, business impact requires a deep understanding of the different operations on which the company is working and get maximum return on investment. So, there are many factors and also may not be the same for all the organization, but we will see some of the common impact factors. So, financial damage. How much financial damage will result from an exploit? So, less than the cost to fix the vulnerability, we can give 1. Minor effect on annual profit, we can give 3. Sufficient effect on an annual profit, we can give 7. And bankruptcy, we can give 9 because it is on a high risk. Reputation damage. Would an exploit result in reputation damage that would harm the business? So, minimal damage, we can give 1. Loss of major accounts, we can give 4. Loss of goodwill, we can give 5. Brand damage, we can give 9. Non-compliance. How much the exposure does non-compliance introduce? So, minor violation, we can give 2. Clear violation, we can give 5. High profit violation, we can give 7. Finally, privacy violation. How much personally identifiable information could be disclosed? One individual, we can give 3. Hundreds of people, we can rate it to 5. And thousands of people, we can rate it to 7. And millions of people, we can rate it to on a high risk, that is 9. Now, let us talk about the severity of the risk. We will now prepare the severity of the risk, which can be obtained by combining the different impact factors. So, it is divided into 3 parts from 0 to 9 scale, low, medium or high as shown below. So, impact scale 0 to 3, so impact level is low, 3 to 6 the impact level is medium, and 6 to 9 the impact level is very much high. Now, what exactly we need to take as a countermeasure or to control the threats? So, in this step we have to identify existing security policies and protocols which are placed. So, are they adequate with the current threat landscape, or it needs to modify and update the security posture of the organization? What level of risk is acceptable to the organization? Because it is not always necessary that the risk level are same for each and every organization. So, this will help security team and top management to understand the risk level, and they can focus on more high level risk. So, one of the most important thing finally is documentation. So, this is the final step in which risk assessment report is prepared to support the management to take appropriate decision on policies, procedures, budget allocation. And for each threat, the report should have corresponding vulnerabilities, assets at risk, impact and control remediation. So, friends, let us sum up this session. In this chapter, we have seen what all different types of attacks and what it can cause. Next is we have seen threats and consequences, which is followed by risk assessment, procedure which includes threat assessment, vulnerability assessment, and how to prepare the severity matrix to report the threat to the management. Also, based on the identified risk in the report, we have to recommend the security policy and procedure to rebuild the security posture of the organization from the current threats and attacks. So, friends, in this particular session, we discussed attack vectors, threats, risk and vulnerability. So, friends, it is not always necessary that whatever information we have that can be protected in a routine manner, but we need to identify what sort of attacks are happening, before our data, information or to the assets of an organization. We need to identify the risk, we need to identify the risk assessment procedure, and we need to also follow the risk management procedure. So, here we are concluding this session for the course on cyber security tools, techniques and countermeasures. So, we will meet again with the another chapter, another session. Till then, goodbye, thank you and happy learning.